All right, well, we're going to kick off the show this week with a look at the auditing function with our friend Scott Paton of Exemplar Global. Yep. Scott, thanks for joining us. Scott, as many of you may remember, is the former publisher of Quality Digest. So he knows a lot of you and a lot of us. So auditing is a tough job, but it's a critically important one because we know auditors of standards like ISO 9001 ensure that organizations are meeting the requirements of those standards, and naturally those organizations want, and many of them need, to be registered, but more importantly, I think auditors help them keep their systems running smoothly to deliver the highest possible quality and value to customers. Auditors themselves are highly trained professionals who take a hard but fair look, I think, at subject organizations according to the requirements of a given standard. In doing so, they assist in surfacing the issues that can negatively affect quality outcomes. Training and certification auditors themselves are an important part of the process because these individuals are a key cog, perhaps they are the key cog in organizations getting maximum benefits from registration to standards. So to tell us more about auditing and auditor certification, we're pleased, as I mentioned, to welcome Scott Paton, Business Development and Technical Manager of Exemplar Global, to our show. Scott, after that long intro, thank you for joining us. Finally, you get a chance.
Thanks for having me.
Now you got to leave.
That's right, that's right.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, thank you for being here. Well, you know, you're a standards guy. Standards has been something you've known about registration for a long time. So what's kind of the going on now? Of course, there's been a kind of an interesting couple of years with ISO 9001 being launched in 2015. So what are you seeing, and what's your perspective on the standards world these days?
Well, I guess the biggest change in standards world is change itself. We've got NXSL, which came out before 9001 was revised, and all of the new management system standards are built on NXSL, which is more commonly known as the high-level structure. And that's caused a lot of change because all of the management system standards going forward will now be based on it. So 9001 is based on it, 14001, 22001, the new 45001 occupational health and safety standard. The exception is 13485 for medical devices because the revision process started before the high-level structure was released. So they're a little bit of an exception, and we don't know what that will do to their revision cycle. So there's a lot of change going on, and there's a lot of change going on all at once because 9001, 14001, 13485 are all coming due very soon. 9001, 14001, September of this year, you must have made the transition both as an organization and as an auditor, because Exemplar Global and the other personnel certification bodies are requiring you to upgrade your certification so that you're competent to audit to the new standard.
And how are users adapting or accepting these changes? Are they pulling their hair? Are they screaming, running from the building?
Well, to some degree, yes. It's been interesting. We've been watching these numbers of organizations that have made the transition, and as little as I think 3 or 4 months ago, or less than 40% had actually made the transition to the new 9001 standard. Wow. I believe now it's closer to 60%, but that still leaves a whole lot of organizations, hundreds of thousands of organizations globally, who have yet to transition to the new standard. Wow. So there's only about 6 months left in which to do so. So I know accreditation bodies, certification bodies are kind of pulling their hair out, wondering what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Right. How about auditors themselves? I mean, as you say, they need to get up to speed on the new requirements of the standard too. So
they do, yes. And Exemplar Global, I can only speak to what we're doing. You know, we've had a transition process in place for a number of years now. Auditors have to complete an assessment, and they also have to complete audits to the new standard in order for us to fully upgrade them to the 9001 certification. The majority of our auditors have done that, which is good news, but we are getting some feedback from them that because there aren't enough organizations that have made the transition, they're having a difficult time getting the number of audit hours that we and other bodies are requiring them to have in order to be fully competent to the new standard. Mm-hmm. So there's a lag in the process.
So it sounds like there's a need for auditors, obviously.
Oh, definitely.
So
yes.
what would you do to encourage, if somebody's looking for a career change, what would entice somebody to want to be an auditor?
Well, now is a great time to be an auditor.
Because there's lots of work.
There's lots of work out there. Certification bodies are hungry for auditors, particularly in specialized fields, aerospace, medical devices, automotive. They're having a very difficult time finding qualified and competent people to audit for them. And in fact, I've talked with some CBs who've told us we've had to postpone audits because we simply don't have enough auditors.
Wow.
And what are some of the attributes? I mean, what makes a good auditor? I mean, if you wanted to get into this field, what are some of the things that you would want to have and know about?
Well, at Exemplar Global, we look at a whole variety of different things to determine an auditor's competence. And competence is this big question mark that's out in the industry now. If you talk to a body like Jazzants from Australia, New Zealand, or ANAB here in the United States, they're very concerned about the competence of auditors. And as are we, because that's our job, to demonstrate an auditor's competence to a potential employer. So we look at your work experience, we look at your education experience, we look at the types of audits that you've done, your role in the audit process, how many audit hours you have, and then we also look at your personality attributes, which is, do you have the right personality to even be an auditor? Is this a field you should be working in? So we've developed something called our work style assessment, which is a personality attributes tool, which is based on ISO 19011.
Mm-hmm. So it basically just uncovers and surfaces some of those things so you and the auditor themselves, the person themselves, can know if it's kind of a fit for what they want to get into.
Absolutely. We look at things like coachability, dominance, aggression, responsibility, a whole host of different attributes. And we do a quick little 15-minute online assessment, which is a bit deceiving because you wouldn't think 15 minutes is that long in order to learn so much about you. But because we partnered with an organization that specializes in building these assessments for large corporations, it's named CalentClick, and they're actually up in Vancouver. They built a psychometrically sound, very valid assessment of your attributes. And when you get your report back, it not only tells you where you fall on the scale of all these different attributes, it gives you some input, like this is what potential coaching you might need. This is what the type of job that you might be a best fit for. As an employer, when you get the copy of the employer's report, it gives you suggested questions to ask when you're interviewing someone. So it's a very useful tool, not just for the auditor, but for the potential employer of the auditor.
So do auditors typically work on their own, like are freelance, or do they typically work directly for a registrar, whoever it might be?
Both.
Okay.
A lot of registrars or certification bodies
Yeah.
contract with auditors. Very few of them have a full-time staff of auditors.
Okay.
Most of them have a mix of a few paid staff and then mostly contractors.
Okay. So if you're looking for your own type of, kind of, we talk about the gig economy, your own gig. I mean, an auditor might be one, and they could work for maybe BSI one time.
Absolutely.
And a completely different registrar or certification body than another time, right?
And many of them do. When we survey our auditors, I think the majority of them are actually working for 2 or more certification bodies.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And the personality stuff, just getting back to the assessment of that, and that's important because, I mean, it's a personal thing. I mean, it's a science to it. I mean, obviously you're going through a document, you're trying to make sure that there's a compliance to that, to the requirements, but there's also a certain amount of, how shall I say this, there's a personal interaction, a transaction that goes into that as well. So an auditor is being able to have the ability to understand and maybe look beyond just what's on the paper, maybe is valuable as well.
Absolutely, and that's a nice thing about the report that we give you because it does take a dive into what does this mean to me as an auditor, what does it mean to my potential employer, and the other thing that's really nice about it is beyond just an individual look, you can get access to the data as a certification body. So if you contract with us to do these personality assessments for all of your auditors, you can then take a look at, well, where does auditor X fall against the wider auditor pool that I employ? So you might say, oh, well, auditor X might need some additional coaching and development work, or auditor Y might be a great potential mentor for auditor X. Well, it also tells you, well, we might be able to develop some new products or tools based on the results that we're seeing. And the other really exciting piece of this is you'll also have the capability to look not just at your own auditors, but the auditors from the entire auditor pool that we certify. So now you can see where your auditor falls against potentially 10,000 folks around the world, and how you compare against your competition and how your auditors compare against your competition.
Interesting.
So it's a very cool tool.
Very useful.
Yeah.
So now I actually have another interesting thing coming up, your International Auditor Symposium, right? Is the name of the event. And that's an online event that's happening in May, I believe it is. Really interesting. So talk us a little bit about what that is and what the user might be interested in learning about it we get.
Sure. Well, in our efforts to make auditors more competent, we like to give them some education. So we developed this online conference last year, kind of as a lark. We didn't know what we were doing, but we ended up having 1,000 people attend.
Whoa, okay.
So it turned out very well. We had 14 presenters in our first year. This year we decided to put a little bit more muscle behind it, a little bit more marketing behind it, and we're expecting several thousand people to attend. We've got some nice sponsors who've agreed to help us with the event. Omnex, DNV, SAI Global, ASQ, our parent company, is also sponsoring the event. So we're going to have more than 40 presenters.
Yes. Very impressive roster.
Yes.
It's all online.
All online. It's open 24/7 for that 2-week period. It's free if you're an Exemplar Global Certified Auditor, and it's only $99 if you're not. So it's very cheap.
Cheap, yeah.
And it's a good way of you getting exposure to a lot of these new concepts, new standards that are coming out. And you can also do a little bit of networking because we're putting some online commenting tools in there. And
a lot of content. Like I say, a lot of content, and the roster of presenters is very impressive.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of really, really good people with a lot of expertise, deep roots in the standards.
Yeah, and we've got 6 different tracks this year. We've got quality, environment, food, occupational health and safety, auditor skills, and integrated management systems.
So for those in the audience that are watching, I mean, people that you would want to maybe come to this event would be obviously some clients already of Exemplar Global, but people that also maybe are just interested in learning more about auditing.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And you can just go to the Exemplar Global website, exemplarglobal.org. There's a giant link on there. It'll take you right to the conference site, and you can register.
That's great. That's great. Well, Scott Paton, thanks. A quick 10 minutes
pleasure.
there, 12 minutes. Thanks for joining us on the show. We'll, again, encourage everyone out there to go out to the site and check it out. It's exemplarglobal.org, yes?
Exemplarglobal.org.
As he said.
Click on the link, and you'll go right there.